Well, I'm back from my trip to the UK and Iceland. I actually got back a couple of months ago. I wanted to just point out that nearly half of you who have subscribed have done so since just the beginning of that series. The support I've got throughout that series of videos has been really fantastic. So thank you to everybody who has subscribed, all of the likes, and of course the comments and the feedback that I get has just been brilliant. So thank you. If you're new here, then I'm a photographer based in Australia. So typically my videos are from Australian locations. So if that's something that you might be interested in, I recommend you check out some of my other videos. And if it's the sort of content that you'd like to see more of, then consider subscribing so you don't miss any of the new videos that I upload. I've received a ton of questions over the last couple of weeks about different aspects of the trip that I took, particularly to Iceland. So I thought in this video, what I'd do is I'd cover off most of that information. I don't normally do talking type of videos, so my plan here is to squeeze as much information as I possibly can into the video so that I cover the questions. I'll leave a list of topics that I cover in the description below, along with the timestamp. So if you're interested in a particular part of my Iceland trip, you can skip straight to that point. Before I start, I want to say a big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you need a website, a domain, or an online store, then make your next move with Squarespace. So back in around about February 2016, my local cricket club that I play for decided that they were going to do a tour of the UK for their 40th anniversary. I put up my hand straight away to be included in the tour. I knew straight away that I was going to take my photography gear because there were plenty of places around the UK that I wanted to visit and take landscape images. In around about May of 2016, when we started booking our flights, I decided I wanted to extend my trip to Iceland. Why? Pretty much because, like most photographers, Iceland was on my bucket list, and this was a great opportunity of just getting from the UK to Iceland instead of having to pay for a trip from Australia. Because Australia is so far away from Iceland, the travel costs are quite high. So being in the UK was the perfect opportunity to extend my trip by a week, get across to Iceland and then back home. Because Iceland is such a fantastic place for photography, I knew I wanted to document my trip in video. But back then, video was pretty new to me. I really didn't know what I was doing. So like photography, the best way of getting better at something and improving is to just practice. About a month later, on a trip that I took down south to Albany, I grabbed my GoPro and then just started filming videos. I uploaded those videos to YouTube, and that was the start of this channel. So I chose to stay in Iceland for about a week. I think it was 6 days in the end. Now, I could have stayed longer easily, but I had family and I had work commitments back home, and really I couldn't afford to be away longer than a month. In terms of planning, if I was honest, a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give myself about a 5. I'm not typically the sort of person who wants to plan things to the finest of details. I'm happy with a general plan because I want to be able to adapt as the trip progresses, depending on whether I find a really interesting location that I want to spend more time at, or the weather conditions just aren't right and I need to hang around for a little bit longer. But having some idea of what I wanted to cover meant that I wasn't wasting my time and I was making the most of the opportunity that I had while I was there. So I had 3 or 4 places I definitely wanted to see. Kirkafell was one of them, the Black Beach Sea near Vic, and the Ice Lagoon. These were 3 places that I definitely wanted to hit up. So even before I went over there, I knew that it was the southwest corner of Iceland that I was going to concentrate on. I could have spent the week driving right round Iceland on the ring road. The problem with this was I was going to spend most of my time driving and there wasn't going to be a lot of time spare to get out and take landscape images. Like most landscape photographers, I had an interest in Iceland for some time, and knew of some of the locations that I wanted to visit if given the opportunity. Leading up to the trip, I started taking notes in Evernote of locations that I wanted to visit. I started to find these locations also on Google Maps, so I had a fair idea of the distances I needed to travel to get there. In my research though, I discovered this map of Iceland, and it's designed for landscape photographers. It's by the international photographer, and not only does it cover things like towns and roads that you're going to be using across the country, but it also highlights some of the interesting tourist locations that can be found, including some of the hidden gems. But more importantly, it highlights the really photographic areas of Iceland, where if you visit there, there's the opportunity of taking really spectacular landscape photos. I found this really invaluable, not only just in the lead up to the trip, but also when I was traveling around Iceland, I was referring to this map all the time. You can buy this map online. It's absolutely fantastic. I'll leave a link in the description below. If you're lucky enough ever to travel to Iceland, I highly recommend you buy this. So for the week that I was there, I rented a motorhome from Snails. I did a video about that car a couple of weeks ago. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it in the description below. I chose a motorhome because I wanted to cover transport and accommodation in the one cost. It also provided me a great amount of flexibility. As I mentioned on a few videos, I spent most of the nights shooting because that was when the best light was occurring. The advantages of a motorhome over booking a hotel meant that I didn't have to deal with check-in and check-out times, or it meant that I didn't have to be at a particular place or a location or town just because I'd booked a hotel there. I chose a motorhome over staying in a tent basically because of the weather conditions, and I just wasn't too sure whether I was going to get good weather conditions or favourable weather conditions, even though I was staying in Iceland during summer. As it turns out, I probably could have got away with staying in a tent. We got a little bit of rain, there was a little bit of wind, but nothing ever too heavy. However, if I had chosen a tent, I would have had to have hired the gear while I was there. Because of weight limits, I couldn't have brought my own camping gear with me. I'd have also had to spend the time setting up and packing up the tent each day, which meant that there was less time for exploring, getting to a location and shooting. So in the end, the motorhome was the way I went, and it was really convenient because I could just rock up to a campsite. I didn't book the campsites. I could just rock up there and there were plenty of spaces whenever I wanted to, wherever I wanted to, and within a couple of minutes I was ready to sleep and have a rest. The motorhome I had was technically a four-wheel drive, but I wasn't allowed to use it on the F-roads. For that you needed a much bigger four-wheel drive. That really wasn't an issue because this was my first trip to Iceland. I was only going to be there for a week, so I knew that there were plenty of places that I wanted to visit that I could access from the main road in the vehicle that I had. If I visited Iceland again, I would consider getting a bigger four-wheel drive that allowed me on the F-roads and into the highlands so that I could access the slightly more difficult and harder to reach areas of Iceland. But I'd probably stay there a little bit longer. As you can imagine, the week was fantastic, but it just flew by really, really quickly. I'd probably stay a minimum of 2 weeks if I went again, maybe even 3 or 4 weeks to make the trip really worthwhile. Up until a few years ago, I think you could pretty much park your motorhome anywhere around the country and stay a night, but authorities are starting to crack down on that with the increase in tourism in the country. And they're really encouraging people to stay at campsites. I must admit, the campsites are fantastic. They're nice and simple, but they've got toilet facilities, showers. Most have got even a kitchen that you can use for cooking. They're just generally just really nice places to stay, so I'd highly recommend them. And they're pretty cheap as well. They're around about 15 Australian dollars, so they're not expensive at all. They're pretty easy to find. There's a book that you can pick up at most tourist locations, shops, car rental places that lists all accommodation that's available in Iceland. from hotels, motels, B&Bs, and also the campsites are listed in there as well, so I'd recommend that you pick up that book before you leave Reykjavik. Most towns either have a campsite either in the town or very close by, and they're usually very well signposted, so I never had any trouble finding a campsite. There are also plenty of websites marked on the map that I mentioned before, so again, another good reason of picking this up. So the week that I was in Iceland was in June, which is just the start of summer. The days are nice and long. The sun wasn't setting until around about 12:30 at night and was rising around about 2 hours later. So it never ever got dark while I was there. So the plan I had before I got there was to use the day to drive around to different locations and explore different places, and then wait for the best light to shoot, and then sleep whenever I could or whenever I needed to. And pretty much that's how it worked out. I'd drive to a location during the day, explore it. When the light started to soften, I would get the camera out and shoot as many images and then vlog as much footage as I possibly could. I'd then drive to the nearest campsite where I'd have something to eat, have a shower, back up all of my images and footage, and then have a sleep, and then I'd be up again and repeat the whole process. That worked out really well for me. I got enough sleep and I was nice and fresh when I did need to vlog and take images. I didn't feel as if I wasted my time while I was there. Really felt as if I utilised my time well. I've received heaps of questions about the cost of the trip, probably by people who are considering taking the trip themselves. Obviously it depends on where you're flying from, how long you're staying there, and what sort of trip you're planning on having while you're in Iceland. But to give you a bit of an idea, I'm going to run through my costs for the week while I was in Iceland. Most of the time I have to convert prices from US dollars, pounds and euros into Australian dollars, but this time it's your turn to convert. All my costs are going to be given to you in Australian dollars. You can convert them to your local currency. Flights from the UK to Iceland return was 682 Australian. Renting the motorhome for the 6 days was $1,531. I went through around about $400 in fuel, and the campsites turned out to be around about $90. Food cost a total of $300 for the week, and there were some miscellaneous costs as well. Things like my final night of accommodation, which was actually in Reykjavik itself. There was a pickup fee from the airport, some taxi costs, a ticket back out to the airport for the bus, and there was a toll that I picked up as well. But all up, those miscellaneous costs were around about $350. So the total cost for the trip for me was just over $3,300, which I don't think was too bad. I think it was really good value considering what I got out of the trip. I'm not about to go through all of my camera gear. I did a video on what gear I use earlier this year. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it in the description below. But to give you a bit of an overview, along with the Nikon D800, I took the 17 to 35mm lens, which I used around about 10% of the time. I also had the 24 to 70mm, which I used probably 60% of the time. And then I had the 70 to 200mm, which I used 30% of the time. On top of that, I also had the teleconverter when I needed that extra bit of reach. I know it's a lot of gear, but keep in mind that I was taking landscape images in England and Scotland, as well as Iceland. I was also taking images of the cricket players when we were playing cricket as well. So there was quite a lot of different type of photography that I was doing, and because I wasn't familiar with the landscapes, I really wasn't too sure what lenses I'd use. If I went again and needed to reduce the weight because there was quite a lot of gear and it was quite heavy, I probably wouldn't take the 17 to 35, pretty much because I didn't use it much. think the reason why I didn't use it much was most of the landscapes had large mountains in the distance, and when you have a wide angle like this, it makes those features quite small and decreases the impact they have in the image. You really want to zoom in and get in tight, and the 24 to 70 is plenty wide enough for most wide angle landscapes that I wanted to take. So the other gear that I took was my polarizers, along with all of my other filters and my Lee filter mount. The Enduro tripod that I got at the beginning of the year, along with the Enduro ball head, cloths, the rocket blower, and any other accessory that I needed for the camera, like the cable shutter. I also had my Mavic Pro along with the controller, my MacBook Pro, which I used for a little bit of editing and backing up my images. Plus I had all of my vlogging gear as well. So as you can see, I had quite a lot of gear, but I was traveling for a month to various locations for various types of different photography, for both stills and video. And in the end, I pretty much used all the equipment that I took. So that's the standard landscape photography gear that I took on the trip. But I also took some other gear that helped me specifically with the travel aspect. And I want to share some of that with you now. First are these pouches from Think Tank. They come in a range of sizes. This one is the Powerhouse Pro, and they really are fantastic. I've got two of them. I use one of them to store all of my vlogging gear. I use another one for all of the power cables and recharge cables that I use. What I've realized when traveling is that it's really important to be organized. If you're organized with these pouches, you can quickly grab different gear depending on the location that you're in or the day hike that you're about to take, if you want to decrease the amount of gear quickly. So I really do love these pouches, and I'm probably going to get a couple more. The next thing are these red whips, also from Think Tank. I've mentioned these before, but they are just so good and so cheap. Particularly with travel, it's really important to be able to have things, as I said, organized, packed, neat and tidy. I use these to tie around cables when I'm storing them, to also tie down cables like my remote shutter in windy situations. They really do have an endless number of uses. It really depends on your imagination. They are so cheap. You can pick them up from Amazon. I'll leave the link in the description below. Before I went on the trip, I knew I was going to be in a few locations where it was going to be difficult to access a wall charger to charge the many devices that I was bringing. So what I did was I went out and bought a power brick. This one here is from a company called Anker. It is rated to 26,000 milliamps, which is brilliant. It means that I can recharge my phone up to 5 times. Comes with 3 charging ports, so I can charge multiple devices. It also comes with 2 input ports, which allows me to recharge this when I need to very quickly. For its weight, it has a very high capacity. I've been really happy with this. I've been using this for now 6 to 8 months. So I'm using this now even after my trip. I bring it to work, I bring it on other holidays that I have, day trips. The kids can recharge their devices. So that was a great purchase. Along with the cable also from Anker. This is a iPhone cable, a braided cable, very strong. I didn't want the cable that I took with me to break, and this was really good. It's a great quality. It's a little bit more expensive, but I've been using this for now just over a year, and it doesn't even look like breaking. I use this all the time, also from Anker. Before I got to Iceland, I was aware that the car that I was going to rent only had one 12-volt cigarette lighter. So what I did was I went and purchased this adapter from Belkin. So this plugged into the charger, and altogether it gave me 4 2.4 amp recharging ports, which is exactly what I needed while traveling around. Most of the recharging that I was doing in Iceland was through the car when I was running the car. If I wasn't running the car, I was using the power brick to recharge the devices. I knew I needed at least 4 recharging ports because I had the Mavic Pro batteries that I needed to recharge. I had the controller that I needed to recharge. I also had multiple camera batteries that I needed to recharge on the go throughout the day. So just having one port wasn't going to be good enough. This gave me 4. Absolutely brilliant. Talking about batteries, I picked up these recharging stations, one for the Nikon D800, one for the batteries for the G7X Mark II. The beauty about these is that they recharged through a USB cable that plugged in to the recharge cable that I had for the car or the Anker power brick that I had. This enabled me to recharge the batteries throughout the day without having to have access to a wall charging station. To back up all of my images and all of my video footage that I took, I used the SanDisk Extreme 200. It's a SSD external drive, and I was using it quite successfully throughout the trip. The problem with it was right at the end of the trip, I pulled out the cable and with it came the port, which was part of the device. It just broke straight off the device, rendering the entire thing completely useless. And it also meant that I couldn't access any of my images and any of my footage. So you can imagine how surprised I was, and it's just never a good thing when your backup fails. Fortunately, because of the length of time that I was going to be away, I decided that I was going to back up to 2 devices. So along with the SanDisk, I also backed up to this WD Elements drive as well. I think this is a 2 terabyte drive. And I was so thankful that I did, because one backup failed. I relied completely on this backup here to access all the footage and all of my files. So I was really disappointed with the fact that the SanDisk broke. I took it back for a refund. They offered me a new one, but I didn't take it because I just didn't have the confidence that it wasn't going to break on me again. And if you don't have the confidence in the devices that you're backing up to, there's almost no point in backing up to them. So I've gone ahead and bought a Samsung T3 SS drive, which I'm currently using. I haven't been using it for too long. I also picked up a NAR box, which I'm using the Samsung drive with. I haven't used it for too long, so I can't really tell you whether it's any good. But what it does is it removes the need for me to bring a laptop. I can back straight up to this and also a drive that I can plug into this unit without the need of a laptop, which means I don't have to bring my laptop with me. Great for reducing the amount of gear that I have to carry. You can tether this wirelessly with your iPhone or your iPad. You can even start editing video and images with this as well, which I haven't really tried, but I'm keen to give that a go. So that's what I'm currently using to back up my gear along with the Western Digital. So some of you are interested in how I travelled on the airlines with all of this gear. I took 2 bags with me. One of them was my regular bag that I use for landscape photography, the f-stop Talopa. This bag is too big to use as carry-on luggage. It's got the straps that get in the way, and it's just oversized. They just wouldn't accept it. But inside this bag comes this ICU. So I'd take the ICU out of the Talopa. I'd pack the Talopa in my suitcase along with the tripod that I used. And in this ICU bag, I would fit anything that was that could possibly get damaged by the airline or that was required by the airline to put in there. So my cameras, lenses, the Mavic Pro, the controller, and all of the batteries for the Pro and the cameras all went into this bag here. I would zip this up and I would place that into this bag, which is a slightly smaller bag. This is the Osprey Farpoint 40. It's a 40-litre bag, and it's just the right size to conform with most of the airline regulations around the world. It's a great bag for carry-on. This ICU would fit into this bag, and I'd carry all of that gear as carry-on luggage. I flew Etihad and Iceland Air, and the bags were checked every time, but I was never questioned about the camera gear, the Mavic Pro, or even the batteries, the LiPo batteries that I was carrying. I was always taken aside because the X-ray machines would pick up the camera gear, so they always were interested in looking through the gear, but there never seemed to be a problem with the devices or the batteries that I took. So flying wasn't an issue. I've been asked on a few occasions when I think the best time is to go to Iceland. And from a photographer's perspective, I think you can go to Iceland any time of the year and capture stunning images. It's just that sort of place. Other things to consider though is during summer, the weather is milder and the days are longer. So it's a nicer time of the year. So with the sun setting so late and rising early, and there being light 24 hours of the day, there's plenty of opportunities to get out there and explore and take photos. The downside, of course, is that it's tourist season. So not only are things busy, but it's more expensive generally. Accommodation is more expensive, travel is more expensive. So there's that to consider. In winter, you're taking your chances with more extreme weather. That means that some of the roads may be closed, some of the access, certainly to the highlands, might be cut off. There might be days where it's just so miserable that you just can't get out and take photos. The days, of course, are shorter with long periods of darkness. So the opportunities of getting out there and taking photos is much less. However, the photos that you would take would be absolutely spectacular. And of course, there'd be the chance of catching the Northern Lights. So it's a difficult decision to make. So that's it for this video. I hope it helped. At the very least, I hope parts of it were interesting. If you've got this far, please give us a like. I think I've managed to answer most of the questions that I received. If there is a question that you have that I haven't answered, please leave it in the comments below and I'll try and get back to you. Also, I'd love to know whether you're planning a trip to Iceland yourself soon. I've only been to Iceland once, which doesn't make me an expert, and I know that there's lots of you out there that have been several times. So if there's a question in the comments below that you can add your experience and knowledge, then please reply to somebody and help them out. This video was sponsored by the wonderful people at Squarespace. It's an all-in-one platform that you can create gorgeous websites. It's simple to set up a domain, choose a style from their wide range of beautiful templates, and then you just easily add your content. To top it all off, they've got award-winning 24/7 customer service. I've been using Squarespace for over 4 years now, and I highly recommend you check them out. Start your free trial at squarespace.com and go to squarespace.com/Andrew Marr to get 10% off your first purchase. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's free, and if you do so, make sure you hit the notification bell so you're notified when I upload my next video. Until then, guys, thanks very much for watching. Cricket players, there's a bug, which I probably used hopefully that'll make sense.